That's an interesting question, the question of the one and the many. This comes all the way from Aristotle's time. It's a question that he had to grapple with and has been grappled with ever since. And man has not come up with a solution to the problem. What is the nature of the problem? Is what's ultimate down here? It's a quest for the ultimate. Is oneness and unity and universals ultimate, or is it all these disconnected particulars that are ultimate? And when you play this out century after century, it becomes a battle between different opposing forces that either unite everything into a big massless one that's undifferentiated monolithically, or expands it out to a whole exploded universe of atomistic individuals who do their own thing, say. And that's when you put it into the political realm. How does this play out in society? How do you have a society? If one is ultimate, then of course it's going to be a gigantic totalitarian state, and there's not going to be any differences between anybody. But if you have everyone a law unto themselves, then you have anarchy. So there's a solution to this problem, and it's one that modern man is in the flight from it, fleeing from in every direction, as Mark would say, away from God's solution of the problem. And the basic premise that Dr. Rashuni Van Til put out was, down on this level, in the created realm, neither of these things are ultimate, because only God is ultimate. And in the Trinity, in God's nature, unity and diversity are equally ultimate. In other words, you have God is one, but you also have three persons in the Godhead. You have God is one, God is three simultaneously. And it's an amazing thing, and it kind of defies most people's attempt to put it together, though our confessions do a reasonably good job of trying to. But the point of the matter is that neither one excludes the other or preempts the other or trumps the other. In all cases in the Trinity, these two things are matched evenly because there's no conflict in the Godhead in how God exists and subsists in his own nature. And that means that we have a creator, capital C creator, involved. And that means that when he creates, everything down here is not ultimate, it's derivative. And if it's derivative, then you can't be seeking ultimacy down here. You can't be asking what's ultimate, the one or the many. Rather, both of those things then reflect the Trinity down here. And because the Trinity is the only solution to this problem, which keeps them in balance and in control, so that one doesn't overshadow the other, it's one or the other going to be, because it's a mortal fight, it's the only solution to a stable situation, which is reflected in the kingdom of God. And God arbitrates that through his law. His law basically puts the limitations on law, which might unify everything, or power, I should say, power that unifies everything, or liberty, which fragments everything apart. And in God's law, we have the balance between those two because God's law limits power and limits liberty. So you can have maximum liberty and a minimal amount of power to achieve a social structure that doesn't collapse. Because what modern man has done is to try to come up with a dialectic tension. Dialectic means we're trying to hold that these two things exist and we kind of can keep them a knife-edge balance so we don't kind of break down into one or the other. But modern man always finds that he cannot get past that point of collapse. So all these cultures collapse over time. And Dr. Rushton's book, with the one and the many, is century after century showing how all these things collapse either to the one or the many, because they have tried to divinize the world, make the world divine, make it ultimate. And when you make it ultimate, then the question then is oneness and unity ultimate? Or is it diversity that's ultimate, the particulars? And so it's this battle between these two that looks like it's philosophical, but it plays out in the social and political realm continually. And because it does, you have warring visions of what the unity should be. And if you have a God that's not a trinity, triune God like Christianity has, you're going to have a monotheistic God, say, purely monotheistic, then the one's going to prevail. And everyone's going to have a different notion of what that one should look like, and then you determine that out of the muzzle of a gun. And if you don't have a God at all, then we're all gods, and then you have the pure anarchy and everyone being a law unto themselves. And unfortunately, man makes a prey of his fellow man, and that usually leads to the breakdown of all society. And then we end up with the strong men, again, exerting power, and all of this is out of balance. So what we're talking about here is how the law of God is God's mechanism by speaking into the creation and keeping these two things in balance so they reflect the Creator. So we think God's thoughts after him, and we reflect his nature in the nature of our social relations. And that means there's responsibilities for the Christians to not simply allow the state to unify everything under the one. we have an obligation to push back in the other direction and diffuse power through society by applying God's law. And you can see that it has implications for every single nation, every single family, every single state, every magistracy out there. It all applies because this question is always present. It may not be discussed openly, but it's there. And the very fact that we are fighting over how should the United States look as a nation proves it.